G'day guys, and today I want to talk about being a man. Not necessarily in a sense of a how-to guide or how to be a successful man or an alpha male or anything like that, but more from a conceptual sense. So it's an interesting dichotomy that I want to bring to your attention, is that being a good man is not the same thing as being good at being a man. Now I'll attempt to explain this dichotomy. So civilization, culture, society, the orthodoxy, whatever you want to call it, that wants us to be good men, because obviously bad men can bring about the destruction of a civilization and orthodoxy and that sort of thing. We can think of dissidents, violent and non-violent throughout history. They were not labelled good men by society. We can think of people like Socrates, he was labelled a bad man, and obviously violent overseas invaders would also be considered bad men and that sort of thing. And also I believe that men also want to be good men. We don't want to be, as most people, we don't want to be awful. We want to be good. We want to succeed, and we want to live a good life. And we think we can do this most profitably, most sustainably by being good rather than being bad. Now, of course, what constitutes being a good man is a very wide and far-reaching topic, and it's also something that has changed over time. Nowadays, we think about what makes a good man from, again, the perspective of the orthodoxy, and it's not the same thing as what constituted a good man, say, back in primordial times, Roman times, medieval times, and that sort of thing. Because we've got to think about it. Man is not a noun. Well, it's not just a noun, I should say. It's a role. It's a function. Men don't merely exist. They do things. And things in the primordial past, in the Roman times, the Viking times, wherever, have required certain virtues that are frowned upon nowadays by the orthodoxy when it does not suit that orthodoxy. Principally, we can think of this idea that I've talked about before on the channel, that men like to gang up and fight other groups of men. Now, this isn't very good for sustaining a civilization, because civilizations are founded on sort of order and a rejection, staving off of chaos, and conflict is obviously a massive source of chaos, so this isn't good for the orthodoxy. So we can think in a basic sense, if we want to have a civilization, we need to sort of restrain men in a bit and say, stop beating each other over the head with rocks, and perhaps if you do want to gang up and fight each other, do it in a more civilized way, which is of course public debate, what I'm doing now, and this sort of thing. So straight away we can begin to see the dichotomy between being a good man according to a certain civilization and being good at being a man. So obviously someone who's good at being a man will find himself with a natural tendency to group together with like-minded men and establish who's in our group and who's outside it, and obviously compete and battle against people outside the group in a peaceful or violent manner depending on the situation. As you're probably aware, this behavior is not always tolerated nowadays. Now when we think about, say, a sports team, civilization, society, the orthodoxy doesn't mind if men gang up together and compete with one another, because that's in a controlled, sanitized space. But what they certainly don't like is groups of men getting together and deciding, look, we want to control the borders, we don't like the mass influx, the mass importation of people from the third world, people who don't share our values, people who don't seem to respect women. That's something that is not viewed as being good by the orthodoxy. So the orthodoxy looks at these men and says, these are not good men. These men, by ganging up, by forming this group, by forming us and them, are performing their role, they're performing their function. This is what men are supposed to do. But the society, the orthodoxy, will label them as bad men, because this is not what society wants the men to do. And that's the key difference. Society wants certain things from men. It doesn't want everything men have to offer, because obviously everything men have to offer might actually bring about the destruction of society. So it will attempt to cajole and propagandize and attempt to curb the thinking of certain men. And we see this a lot through the what the UN discusses concerning masculinity, obviously the Gillette ad, which I reported on, which was widely reported on. It's attempting to define what constitutes a good man. It is painfully ironic that the virtues of men, things such as strength, courage, and honor, things that have actually built up the society that they live in, are now things that this same society spits on them for. It's an absolutely wretched and disgusting act. If we just think about courage, and obviously being courageous is the willingness to risk harm to yourself in order to benefit yourself or others. So you will go out and stand in front of the lion to protect your cave and that sort of thing, if you think in a primordial sense. Now, society loves it when men are courageous in certain aspects. They love it when men are mine workers, underwater welders, soldiers. They love it when men are willing to be courageous to defend their civilization. But it has to be something that benefits the civilization. So when men are being courageous by standing up against the orthodoxy and doing things like I'm doing and other people are doing, where they say, look, this is not the way we should be running things. Society is spitting on men. It's spitting on everything that we've stood for. The values which our society have been built on have been trampled, and we don't like the way this is running. Well, then this is labelled bad and evil and disgusting and toxic masculinity and that sort of thing. So we can see how any nice, sanitized, civilized society has an uneasy relationship with men and masculinity as a whole, because on the one hand, you do need men to be men. You do need men to go out and be willing to work dangerous jobs, such as I've said before, underwater welding, uncomfortable jobs, sewer works, working long hours on construction and this sort of stuff, because obviously women aren't as willing to do that sort of thing. They're given the opportunity in society. There's nothing holding women back from being underwater welders, sewer workers, mine workers, oil rig workers, and this sort of thing, and they choose not to. And why the hell wouldn't you? Because it's hot, dangerous, and uncomfortable work. I know, I work in manufacturing. Sometimes I'm strapped up. It's nearing 40 degrees here in Australia in the shed with a sweatbox effect, and I have to get fully strapped up in welding kit to do welding. It's uncomfortable, it's not pleasant, but it's something I enjoy because I'm a man. And obviously women, they don't enjoy that sort of thing, and good on them. They shouldn't have to go out and do that sort of thing, because that's what men are here for. But I digress. Society does want men to be good at being men, but only when it suits society. So obviously when men begin to speak out politically, when they demand control of the borders, they don't want mass importation from the third world, then the benefits of masculinity are quickly slammed shut, and it's derived as toxic masculinity and xenophobia and all these things. It's just an icky thing that must be put away in the corner. And I won't mince words here. It's disgusting, it's dishonorable, and above all, it's just contemptuous of, half your civilization. We should be celebrating what makes a man, as we occasionally do with women. But again, women have their own things where, don't be mothers, that's disgusting and icky and patriarchal and that sort of thing. We should be celebrating not just men, but women as well. Each gender has its own virtues, and we should be celebrating them individually, because that's what makes up society. The individual interlocking virtues of men and women is what builds society. They are complementary. Men and women are the best team in the entire world, and we shouldn't go around lambasting women and men for what comes naturally to them. Now, what comes naturally to men? Well, men like to gang up and they like to fight other men. Men also like to be strong, they like to be courageous, they like to be masterful, they like to be honoured by their brothers, and these are some things that are occasionally not tolerated in society, and you will be viciously ostracised for exercising these virtues. Now, if you're enjoying these ideas I've been talking about in this video today, I highly recommend picking up a book called The Way of Men by Jack Donovan. It is highly insightful as to what exactly masculinity is, historical roles of masculinity, how masculinity changes over time as the civilization develops, obviously the dichotomy between what makes a good man and what makes a man good at being a man. It's an entirely fascinating book, and if you ever wish for one day as a lion, this is the book for you, as the blurb says. So just to recap, what society dictates is a good man is not the same thing as what makes someone good at being a man. There are certain tactical virtues that men naturally want to exhibit. These are such things as strength, courage, and honor, and these are things that society holds at an arm's distance and has a very tenuous relationship with it. Society loves it when men exercise their virtue in order to promulgate society, to sustain society, to go out and fix power lines and work in mines and do horrible stuff. But again, when these virtues are turned against society, well, society comes crashing down like a ton of bricks. Thanks all for sticking around, and have a good one.